Assalamu alaikum. This is our first real episode of our program Iqra. As I had discussed last time, inshallah, this will be a methodical way that we can study the essence of this kitab in the wajh, in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to apply it. And as I said before, we don't want to just die for the sake of Allah. We also want to live for the sake of Allah. Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mamati lillahi rabbil alameen. Your life and your salah and your death and everything should be for the sake of Allah. But we want to try to simplify things in a way that makes us and our kids and our society abide and adhere to this religion in a commonsensical way. So today I thought the first subject that we should really talk about is the haram in the kitab, because that really is the heart of every religion, how to avoid the haram. And that's a question that we all should ask ourselves after, of course, the aqidah and belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What are the things that we should avoid? Now, unfortunately, this is a very sort of like murky subject, because we tend to hear a lot of really unreasonable fatwa. Recently in Saudi and Saudi Arabia, they had a fatwa that the open buffet is haram. So if you go back to this kitab, you will find that the issue is very clear. The haram is in ayat muhkamat, tight ayat that Allah has described as ayat that are al-kitab, the message, the heart, the mother of this kitab. And therefore you will find that Allah has sent us these ayat as ayat muhkamat that cannot be changed. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the authority and the jurisdiction to change those ayats. And since this is the last message from Allah, from the sama, then these ayats are final and forever. Now, this whole thing about, the qiyas, that is a very dangerous, slippery slope that has made, unfortunately, sometimes of the muharramat something that it became kind of like endless, and sometimes many people don't even know where to start and where to end. So today, to be methodical and to keep within the time frame of this lecture, today we're going to talk about the muharramat in the kitab. The muharramat in the kitab are 14 and 14 only. Depends if you add the food ayat into one muharram or separately, but if they are together, they're 14 muharram and 14 things that are haram. There are issues that are nawahi. In nawahi, there's awamr and nawahi. Those we will discuss in a different lecture. Today we're talking about haram, which is the hakimiyya ilahi. Only Allah can say what is haram. Why? Only Allah can say that it's haram. وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَا تَصِفُ أَلْسِنَتُكُمُ الْكَذِبَ هَذَا حَلَالٌ وَهَذَا حَرَامٌ. Allah says, do not say to what you want is halal and haram, لِتَفْتَرُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ, because sometimes that is done and that is lying on behalf of Allah, which is not what Allah wanted. He says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَفْتَرُونَ عَلَى اللَّهِ الْكَذِبَ لَا يُفْلِحُونَ. Those that lie on behalf of Allah end up not succeeding. So let's get down to what are the harams. The first 10 harams are essentially the 10 commandments in all religions, starting with the shirk billah, which is clearly something that is the biggest of haram, and going down Surah Al-An'am in the ayah 149 and going to the ayah 153. Allah discusses and warns us to avoid these harams in a very clear and methodical way. He says, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُوا مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. It doesn't get clearer than this. Come and I will tell you what Allah has made haram for you. And we can go through a list that is very clear, starting with a shirk, the believing of other gods, which is clearly the biggest of harams, as I said, and then عقوق الوالدين. Bir al-Walidain is one of the things that all religions have always emphasized. So Allah says, عقوق الوالدين وبالوالدين إحسانا means the opposite of that is عقوق الوالدين in Surah Al-An'am. Number 3, ولا تقتلوا أولادكم من إملاق نحن نرزقكم وإياهم. Do not kill your children because of fearing poverty. We will provide to you and to them. So killing children is one's children is haram. ولا تقربوا الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن. And do not come near al-fawahish. Now you say, what are al-fawahish? The beauty of this kitab is that it has ayat muhkamat like this, but Allah says that He has also tafsil. Everything كل شيء فصلناه تفصيلا كتاب أحكمت آياته ثم فصلت. So when you have an ayah like this, you will ask, what are the fawahish? Then we can go into a list of tafsil in other surah, and we will have nikah al-maharim as a part of the fawahish. حرمت عليكم أمهاتكم وبناتكم. That is in Surah An-Nisa. It's actually also one of the muharramat. We have nikah al-muhsanat, to have a sexual relations with somebody who's married. Nikah zawjat al-ab, marrying the wife of the father. ولا تنكحوا ما نكح آبائكم. الزنا, which is الجنس العلني, public sexual relations. ولا تقربوا الزنا إنه كان فاحشة وساء سبيلا. السفاح واتخاذ الأخدان. السفاح هو الجنس الجماعي, which is group sex, and اتخاذ الأخدان, which is homosexuality. In المائدة Allah says محصنين غير مسافحين ولا متخذي أخدان. In النساء He says محصنات غير مسافحات ولا متخذات أخدان. So these are the tafsil for this ayah, which is the fawahish. Then we go into the killing, murder. ولا تقتلوا النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق. Look how detailed the kitab is. ولا تقتلوا النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق. So there are situations where killing becomes okay when it's for example penalty, part of the hudud, as capital punishment, for example. Then the next haram is أكل مال اليتيم. ولا تقربوا مال اليتيم إلا بالتي هي أحسن حتى يبلغ أشده. This is also Al-An'am, ayah 152. Then تقربوا مال اليتيم is to take the money or the assets of an orphan. Again, all of these are really moral values, about honesty. Then we have الغش والكيل بالميزان in the ayah أوفوا الكيل والميزان بالقسط لا نكلف نفسا إلا وسعها. Be fair in your trading with people. Do not cheat. So this includes fraud, larceny, embezzlement. These are all included in this as a haram. Next, haram وإذا قلتم فاعدلوا ولو كان ذا قربى. So شهادة الزور is haram. If you say something, it should be the truth. This is Al-An'am 152, and therefore when you go to court or you testify, or in real life, in regular life, you cannot lie. In legal statutes now, we have perjury as something that the law will punish for doing. So a lot of these moral issues have been codified by humans because it's really a common agreement that these things are bad moral values, and they affect people's lives. Then Allah says, as the haram number 10, naqd al-ahd, betraying or breaching your promises. Or bi'ahdi Allahi awfu. This is also Al-An'am. So you have to be honest and live up to your promises in mithaqs. You say that you're gonna give your wife in the event of divorce $10,000 as mu'akhar. You don't come later and say, oh, I really didn't mean it, or I don't have it. Then when you take this ta'ahud, that is mithaq. The next four muharramat are not part of Surah Al-An'am, and they deal with other issues, including al-riba, including food, including al-khamr, and including something very important, which is to say that something is haram. So Allah says in the Muharram number 11, حرمت عليكم الميتة والدم ولحم الخنزير وما أهل لغير الله به وما ذبح على النصب وأن تستقسموا بالأزلام. So haram is the mayta, the dead, الدم, and here we're talking about dam in a different ayah says that the dam has to be masfuhan, which is like oozing blood, because this is part of what some people used to do as shirk. They used to drink blood and so on, or kill or slaughter for the sake of other gods. وَلَحْمِ الْخِنْزِيرِ and the meat of the pig. And here we're talking again about being specific. لحم وَلَحْمُ الْخِنْزِيرِ, the meat of the pig. So if somebody has a surgery and they replace their artery or their valve from an artery from a pig, Allah did not say that is haram. Allah is very punctual and very specific in the kitab, and we have to be very conscious of that. وَمَا ذُبِحَ عَلَى النُّصُبِ, again, part of the shirk, but is being done as ibadah for other deities and other gods. وَأَن تَسْتَقْسِمُوا بِالْأَزْلَامِ, and this includes the gambling. Then the next haram, الإثم والبغي بغير الحق قل إنما حرم ربي الفواحش, which we talked about already, ما ظهر منها وما بطن. So it's not only we will talk about also ما ظهر منها وما بطن in a different lecture, but I just want to try to stay focused here, because he says that those that you see and those that you don't see. والإثم والبغي بغير الحق. الإثم includes الرجز الخمر, because it makes you, rijz means, الإثم makes you kind of like, lose control, and that's part of the sukr, losing one's mind. والبغي بغير الحق, oppression and dhulm, and taking somebody's rights which are not yours. And as I said, nikah al-maharim, which we alluded to before, but it's also in Surah An-Nisa. حرمت عليكم أمهاتكم وبناتكم وأخواتكم وعماتكم وخالاتكم وبنات الأخ وبنات الأخت وأمهاتكم اللاتي أرضعنكم وأخواتكم من الرضاعة. Obviously self-explanatory, incest. This is in Nisa, ayah 23-24. And of course the next Muharram is al-riba. وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَا. Look how Allah says وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ. We know that al-bay' meaning selling or trading is halal, but Allah says ahalla, because He's talking about harram al-riba. He's talking about dealing with the poor, because dealing with somebody who's poor, and that's why riba is really about dealing with the poor and making interest from these transactions with them. Allah says if you give money to the poor, you cannot ask them for interest. But if you have a store and somebody comes to you as a poor person, you're not going to say, oh, I'm going to give it to you for free because you're poor. You can do it as a sadaqah, but you don't have to. Allah ahalla al-bay'. You can make money on somebody, whether he's poor or he's not poor. If it's part of a transaction, you sell them milk, they pay you, that's okay. And then the haram number 14, which is critical, أن تقولوا على الله ما لا تعلمون, which I started with, to say that something is haram when it's not, and you just make it up. That is the biggest problem that we're dealing with today, because it's a slippery slope. You start with saying, let's do qiyas, this is haram, and different, you know, people will have different opinions, and then another person who says, well, this is haram because I'm gonna measure this with that, and then all of a sudden they start making things up, and at some point we get to people saying that, like the example I gave, that, you know, going to an open buffet is haram, and then somebody else, you know, will say that if you know, you have a certain thing in your house is haram, or you know, pictures haram, and it, again, these are things that were all added to the muharramat that we have here. Now, we have the ultimate jurisdiction only for Allah with the muharramat, and the Prophet ﷺ came and he said, قُلْ تَعَالَوْا أَتْلُوا مَا حَرَّمَ رَبُّكُمْ عَلَيْكُمْ. He's telling you in his message what Allah has told him is haram, and that's why we نطيع Allah, we obey Allah, ونطيع الرسول, what he came with in this risala. On the other hand, we have something called nawahi. In nawahi are things that are not in the level of haram because humans have a certain say in them. Those are things that are part of the, you know, do and do not do, and there are they could be tweaked by humans. I'll give you an example. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا وَلَا يَغْتَبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا. We all know that tajassus, spying, is manhiyun anhu. You should not do when you're doing it, you know, towards your neighbors. But what about if you're doing it for your country, for national security? There is a need for society as a whole to protect itself. That now takes a different nature. So there is hakimiyya insaniyya in this, in addition to the hakimiyya ilahi, which is something that we'll talk about in a different lecture. But I just want to distinguish between al-muharramat and al-nawahi. Going to the muharramat, when we look at them, everything that is haram is clear in this kitab, and I just listed the 14. Anything that is not part of those 14 is halal, okay? Now, the nawahi are obviously excluded, but everything else is halal. So we should not always live in this fear that everything could be haram. Because you start asking, can I use a cell phone? Because it may be haram. Can I use, this paper that I bought from a guy that, you know, did something that is, you know, I think may not be proper. Now it's haram. So it becomes, again, a slippery slope. So let's just stick to the 14 harams and abide by them and adhere to them. This way we would be, one, doing ourselves a service, and also it's the best defense against people that are attacking us, whether it's secular people or people that could just really find that they want to belong to the deen, but they just can't accept this sometimes reasonableness that is going on, which could sometimes even, you know, make one's own children, you know, doubt religion. We have to make sure that our kids don't feel like when you tell them that something is haram, you know, that it's not really, that you don't really mean it because you're using the term loosely. It's important that we نحرم ما حرم الله ونحل ما أحل الله, and Rasul was the perfect example in applying this, and therefore he says what Allah has made halal فاتبعوه, and what he made in haram in kitab, in his book, also فاجتنبوه, and we want to try to abide by that, and it actually makes you live your life and be practical and be creative and have, like I said in the beginning, a way of living for the sake of Allah. So I hope that you find benefit in this lecture, inshallah. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.